Montana's high country always looked coldest before dawn. Frost clung to the needles of ancient pine and spread in ghostly ribbons over the valley floor, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Elise Walker drove up the long, winding track in a battered Ford that rattled with every pothole. Each turn of the tires was a memory she couldn't shake. 10 years gone. 10 years since she'd left for a war she couldn't talk about, and a father she'd barely spoken to since. Her hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, breath fogging in the cab. Up ahead, the old Walker Ranch should have been waking to the scent of coffee, wood smoke, horses nickering in the gray light. Instead, what greeted her was silence. Absolute wrong silence. She pressed on the gas. The front gate hung open, one hinge splintered. Charred earth stretched in black scars where the barn had stood. The main house was gone, only a skeleton of beams jutting from the ashes. A wind-twisted frame against the early light. Elise stumbled from the truck, boots crunching on the thin ice, heart slamming in her chest. No one was there to meet her. Not her father's bellow, not a single dog barking. The smell was heavy. Wet ash, burned wood, something darker that made her eyes sting. She called out, voice raw, then pushed through the wreckage, searching for any sign, any hope that this was some mistake. She found him by the old well. Or what was left of him. A sheriff's star glinting in the dirt beside the body, twisted and still. Her father's boots, the ones he never let anyone touch, caked with mud and blood. Elise sank to her knees, fists clenching in the dirt. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. Just her, the body, and the rising wind. No. She tried to steady her breathing, but every inhale was a knife. What happened? Why? Behind her, an engine rumbled. The town's old pickup, blue paint peeling. Sheriff's light flickering. Cole stepped out, hand on his holster, face gray and lined. "Elise, what are you doing here?" he said, voice flat. She turned, choking back something wild. "This is my home, Cole. What the hell happened?" He looked at the ground, then at the remains of the house. "Should ask you the same thing. Place burned 3 nights back. Your daddy's gone, Elise. I'm sorry." "You're sorry," she spat. "That's it? You just left him here? Where's the help? Where's the goddamn justice?" He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "You've been gone too long. Folks around here think it's mighty strange you show up now. Place burned, your name on the deed, folks talking." She shook her head. "You think I did this?" He didn't answer. He just looked at her, old sadness in his eyes, and something else. Fear, maybe. The first rays of sun caught the smoke curling from the ruins, painting the whole scene in an ugly gold. A small crowd was gathering by the fence. Ranch hands, townsfolk, strangers with faces half-shadowed under hats. They whispered, watching Elise with narrow eyes. One man stepped forward. A neighbor, she recognized his limp and the way he never met her gaze. "Saw your truck coming in before dawn," he said, voice sharp. "You weren't around when it happened. Kind of convenient you show up now." Elise's fists balled. "You think I burned my own damn house? Killed my father? What the hell is wrong with you people?" Cole raised his hand, silencing her. "We'll have to bring you in for questioning, Elise. For now, you're not welcome here. Not till we figure out what really happened." The crowd murmured, eyes hard. "No one's on my side." The realization hit her like a wave. Every year she'd spent serving her country, every night she'd dreamed of coming home, all turned to ash at her feet. A bitter wind whipped through the valley. She stood there alone, as the crowd pulled back, as Cole turned away. Her family's land was ruined, poisoned, her father gone, her name dragged through the mud. The sheriff's truck rumbled off, leaving her in the chill and rising sun. Elise looked up at the ridge. There, just at the edge of sight, a wild black Mustang stood outlined against the snow, mane tossing in the wind, as if daring the world to break it. The townsfolk didn't see, their backs turned, but Elise locked eyes with the animal. For one strange, electric moment, she felt its wildness surge in her veins, a promise that she was not finished, not by a long shot. She turned, alone, nothing left but the clothes on her back and a legend that refused to die. And somewhere, beyond the ashes, trouble was only just beginning. The night crept over the Montana high country like a velvet shadow, swallowing the last hints of the sun and leaving the world cloaked in cold and silence. Elise Walker sat alone on the cold earth near the remnants of her family's ranch, the wind tugging at the edges of her worn jacket, whispering through the burnt trees. Her body ached, not just from the chill, but from the weight of loss pressing down on her chest, suffocating and relentless. She hadn't moved since the sheriff's truck drove away, leaving her stranded in the ruin of her past. Every breath she took tasted like ash and bitter defeat. The bitter truth gnawed at her. Her home was gone. Her father dead, the people she once called neighbors now casting her as the villain. Her mind raced, replaying every step that led here, every choice she'd made that seemed meaningless now. She felt the urge to leave, to disappear again, to bury herself far from this broken place and the memories it held. She closed her eyes and tried to will herself to stand, to walk away. But the ground beneath her whispered otherwise. Suddenly, through the chill and silence, a movement caught her eye. A flicker of shadow on the ridge, barely visible in the moonlight. She squinted. A black shape, powerful and wild, stood silhouetted against the sky, a Mustang. The same wild horse she had glimpsed the morning she arrived. It was impossible. No one had seen a wild horse on those lands for years. Yet there it was, staring down at her with fierce intelligence burning in its dark eyes. Elise sat up straighter, heart pounding. She had always believed in legends, the stories her father told her as a child about the wild spirit of the West, untamable and free. And here it was, a living, breathing symbol, drawn inexplicably to her pain. The Mustang shifted, pawing at the rocky ground, then trotted down the slope toward her. She held her breath, unsure if it was friend or foe. But as it approached, it lowered its head gently, sniffing her hand. For a moment, the loneliness that had wrapped around her like a shroud loosened. The horse's presence felt like a lifeline, a spark of hope in the darkness. "Elise," a voice whispered behind her. She spun around, but there was no one there, just the wind and the cold stars blinking overhead. The wind carried a hint of danger, too, a warning she couldn't ignore. Over the next days, the Mustang became her silent companion, appearing at dawn and dusk, always watching, always guiding. She moved through the poisoned land, searching for anything left, anything to reclaim. And then she found it, hidden beneath a fallen beam in what was once the family barn. A small vial, shattered, its contents spilled into the dirt. She picked up the broken glass carefully, then a crumpled letter, water-stained but legible. Her father had been poisoned. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Her blood ran cold. This was no accident, no random fire. It was a planned attack, one meant to wipe out the walkers, to seize the land for someone else. But who? Her fingers trembled as she read the name scrawled in hurried script. Maria Delgado. Elise's mind raced, piecing together whispered rumors from town. A ruthless cartel boss with iron grip over the region, shadowy and merciless. Maria Delgado was a name that made even the sheriff flinch, a woman feared for her brutality and cunning. Elise, the voice came again, sharper this time, cutting through the cold night. She whipped around and spotted a figure slipping between the burned trees, a man in dark clothes, face obscured by a scarf. Heart hammering, she backed away. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice steady despite the fear. "Someone who wants to help," he replied. "But you're in danger. Delgado's watching you." "How do you know my name?" "Because she knows you're the only one who can stop her. But she's already sent men after you." The man's words barely registered before the crunch of boots on gravel echoed behind them. "Elise, get down!" the stranger hissed. From the shadows, two men burst forward, guns drawn, faces hard and merciless. Adrenaline surged as Elise ducked behind a broken wall, heart slamming in her chest. Her hands fumbled for a rock, her only weapon. The stranger grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the trees. The air erupted in chaos. Gunshots shattered the night, bullets whipping through branches. The stranger pushed her hard into a thicket as the attackers fired wildly, their curses lost in the wind. "Elise, follow me!" he barked. She stumbled through the underbrush, lungs burning, until a sudden blur blocked her path. The black Mustang reared up, hooves crashing down with terrifying force on one of the attackers, sending him sprawling. The second man hesitated, stunned. "Go!" the stranger urged, shoving her forward. Elise didn't need telling twice. She sprinted through the darkness, guided only by the horse's glowing silhouette ahead. When she finally collapsed in a clearing, the stranger was gone. The Mustang stood watch, muscles taut and eyes blazing like embers. Her breath came ragged and harsh, but the fire inside her sparked to life. She was alive because of the horse, because of that stranger, because something inside her refused to give in. The truth was clear. Her fight was just beginning. That night, curled beneath the stars, Elise made a vow she could barely whisper out loud. She would reclaim her legacy. She would clear her name. She would bring down Maria Delgado, even if she had to stand alone against the darkness. The Mustang nudged her hand, warm despite the chill, and for the first time in years, Elise smiled, bitter and fierce. The road ahead was deadly and uncertain, but like the wild horse beside her, she was untamable. The first night after losing everything was always supposed to be the hardest. But Elise Walker didn't expect the kind of emptiness that made her wish the wind would simply take her away. She sat in the half-light, knees pulled to her chest on a splintered step that once belonged to her front porch. Shadows pressed close around the ruined homestead. The land she'd run from, now burned, silent, poisoned, felt like a grave. She shivered. Montana spring nights could still cut straight through skin and bone. She could have left. Part of her wanted nothing more than to drive away, to vanish into the endless dark and never look back. But a thread held her in place, a whisper of duty, of the woman she'd become, of the stubborn streak she inherited from her father. Elise buried her face in her hands. The ache wasn't just grief, it was rage and shame, all tangled together until she wasn't sure where one ended and the other began. Dawn was hours away. The moon cast long, thin shadows across the ash and scorched earth. Something moved on the ridge above the homestead. Elise straightened, every nerve tight. At first she thought she was imagining it, but no. There! A black shape, muscles rippling in the faint moonlight, mane wild as a storm. The Mustang. She watched as it stood, proud and unbroken, on the rise overlooking her family's land. The animal made no sound, only held her gaze, like it recognized her pain and challenged her to do something about it. Elise rose, boots crunching the frost-bitten ground, unable to look away. The Mustang finally turned, trotting off into the trees. She felt in that moment that the land itself was telling her something, maybe that her story wasn't finished, no matter how hopeless things looked. She stumbled back to what little shelter remained and tried to sleep. But the past crept into her dreams, her father's laughter by the fire, her own voice rising in argument, the last letter she never sent. In the half-conscious swirl of memory and exhaustion, she remembered him saying, "This land's in your blood, Lisey. No one can take that, not really." She woke to the sound of branches snapping nearby. Instinct kicked in. Elise reached for the pistol she always kept under her pillow back when she had a bed. Her hand closed on nothing but empty air. Another snap. She crouched low and crept toward the edge of the ruined yard. A figure moved through the shadows, tall, broad-shouldered, carrying a flashlight with the beam kept low to the ground. Not the sheriff, not a neighbor. Someone searching for something, or someone. Elise held her breath as the figure knelt by the burned remains of the old barn, sifting through blackened debris. When he stood, Elise caught a glimpse of a tattoo on his neck, a snake coiled around a rose. A chill ran through her. She recognized the symbol. Her time overseas had taught her to spot Cartel ink. They shouldn't be here. Not this far north. Not on her land. She waited until the man disappeared down the trail, then searched the area he'd been digging. Among the wreckage, hidden by a pile of scorched boards, she found a shard of glass from a small vial, and near it, a crumpled note. The handwriting was unmistakable, her father's. The message was simple, but the words made her hands shake. "They're poisoning the land. Trust no one. Delgado, Maria Delgado." The name buzzed in her head like a swarm of hornets. She'd heard whispers in town, a cartel boss expanding her territory, ruthless, untouchable. Her father had known. He'd tried to warn someone. He'd paid for it. Footsteps crunched behind her. Elise ducked, heart racing. Voices, low, urgent, accented. She crept along the side of the barn, keeping to the darkest shadows. "Check the house," one said. "Boss wants no loose ends." Elise froze. She pressed herself flat against the cold earth, barely daring to breathe as the cartel men searched what was left of her home. One tripped over a scorched chair, cursed under his breath. Another rifled through the remnants of the kitchen, scattering ashes and broken dishes. Her muscles ached with tension. She willed herself to be invisible. But then, a sudden noise. The Mustang again, whinnying from the trees, loud and wild. The cartel men looked up, startled. "What the? You hear that?" "It's just a horse, idiot." But Elise knew better. She moved fast, using the distraction to slip away. She darted through the trees, following the sound, trusting her gut and the wild animal's uncanny sense. She heard footsteps behind her, chasing now. Branches whipped her face as she ran, boots thudding on frozen ground. The Mustang burst from the trees in front of her, eyes blazing. It reared, hooves flashing, forcing the men to stagger back. "Forget it," one shouted. "She's got the devil on her side." They retreated, vanishing into the forest. The Mustang circled Elise once, then faded into the darkness. She collapsed, shaking, a strange relief rising in her chest. Alone, but alive. That night, Elise sat with her back to a tree, knees hugged tight, staring up at the stars. The Mustang's silhouette lingered on the edge of her vision. She remembered what the sheriff said, what the town believed. She was alone, framed, hunted. But she wasn't powerless. Not with the truth in her hands, not with the fire in her heart, and not with a wild Mustang, as scarred as she was, refusing to abandon her. Elise made a vow then, as the cold bit into her bones. She would clear her name. She would bring down Maria Delgado and every last person who thought they could poison her land and her life, even if she had to do it by herself. And in the distance, the Mustang called again, a wild, lonely sound that felt, for the first time, like hope. The sun barely crested the mountains before Elise was moving again. She needed shelter, food, and above all, a plan. The memory of last night's ambush burned in her mind. The faces of the cartel men, the way fear twisted their voices when the black Mustang appeared. In the gray dawn, everything felt sharper, more dangerous. Elise scavenged what she could from the ruins. Half a canteen, a battered wool blanket, a hunting knife her father had stashed in the woodshed. Every step on the property reminded her of loss, but it also stoked a new resolve. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her father, for every acre poisoned by greed, for a truth no one wanted to see. She picked her way up a game trail toward the back canyon, following the Mustang's tracks where the snow was thin. The land was wild here, shielded by craggy pines and boulders. It would be easy to disappear if you knew how. Elise did. Years of army training, months spent on survival courses, nights spent listening for enemies in the dark. They all came rushing back. She set traps for rabbits, found a cold spring that bubbled from a seam of rock, built a makeshift lean-to against an outcrop that faced south. Every morning and evening, the Mustang appeared, sometimes near, sometimes at a distance. It watched her as if judging her spirit, its eyes bright with that same wild stubbornness she felt inside herself. She found herself talking to it, voice low, sharing pieces of her day, secrets she'd never said aloud. But as days passed, loneliness pressed in. Her father had been her anchor, and now she was an exile on her own land. The town wanted her gone. The cartel wanted her dead. Elise knew she couldn't do this alone, not if she wanted justice. She thought of the old contacts, the few friends left who hadn't turned their backs. One name rose above the rest, Shannon Riley. Everyone called her Shiv, a joke that stuck because she was sharp, quick, and dangerous as a blade. Shiv was an ex-sniper, dishonorably discharged for reasons Elise never fully learned. They'd crossed paths in Afghanistan, trusted each other in the kind of situations most people never live to remember. Elise hiked out after dusk, keeping to the shadows. She used a burner phone, an old habit, and dialed the only number Shiv had ever given her. The voice on the other end was hard as gravel. "If you're calling, it's trouble." Elise hesitated. "It's worse than trouble. My dad's dead. They framed me for it. Delgado's cartel is here, Shiv. They poisoned the land." A pause. "Prove it." "I've got evidence. I need backup. I can't trust the sheriff, the town, nobody." The line crackled with silence. Finally, Shiv replied, "Meet me at the old logging road, mile marker 20. Come alone." She went, every sense strung tight. The night was so dark it felt thick. Montana darkness, heavy and endless. The Mustang followed her. hooves silent on the pine needles, a living shadow at her side. At the meeting point, Shiv was already waiting, leaning against a battered pickup. Short, lean, and tough as old leather, her eyes scanned Elise like they were rifle scopes. "You look like hell," Shiv said. "Feel like it too." Shiv opened the passenger door. "Get in. We talk on the move." They drove in silence for a while, headlights cutting through the trees. Elise filled her in. Her father, the fire, the poisoned land, the men with the snake and rose tattoo. She showed Shiv the broken vial and the note, the evidence her father had left behind. Shiv's jaw tightened. "Delgado's crew showed up at my sister's place last week, made threats. She's got kids, Elise. They think I'll back down." Elise put a hand on Shiv's shoulder. "You in?" Shiv's laugh was low, sharp. "I was in before you called." They set up camp in the hills, hidden among the rocks and tangled brush. Shiv brought gear, binoculars, scoped rifle, field rations, a first aid kit. Elise marveled at the strange comfort of having a comrade again, someone who understood the weight she carried. They fell into an easy rhythm, sharing stories in hushed tones as the Mustang grazed nearby, always watchful. On the third night, Shiv pointed to a flicker of headlights down in the valley. "Cartel. 2 SUVs, maybe 3 men each, scouting the land." Elise studied the movement through binoculars, mapping their route. "They're getting bold. We need to know what they're after." Shiv handed her a battered walkie-talkie. "You take the ridge. I'll cover the creek bed. Don't get cocky." Elise slipped through the trees, nerves jangling, every sense tuned to danger. The Mustang tracked her from the shadows, silent and sure-footed, always alert. She felt a strange partnership forming, not just with Shiv, but with the wild creature itself. It warned her when the cartel got too close, nudging her away from danger, vanishing only to reappear when she needed courage. That night, Elise and Shiv regrouped at the campsite, reviewing notes, piecing together cartel movements. They shared coffee from a battered thermos, the first hints of hope flickering between them. "You ever wonder why that horse keeps showing up?" Shiv asked, eyeing the Mustang across the firelight. Elise shrugged. "Maybe it's a sign. Maybe it just hates the cartel as much as we do." Shiv grinned, fierce and tired. "Either way, we're not alone." As dawn broke, they made a pact. 2 warriors, scarred but unbroken, ready to face the darkness. The first fragile thread of trust had formed, and with it, the faintest hope that justice was still possible. In the distance, the Mustang reared, silhouetted against the rising sun. And for the first time since her father's death, Elise felt the weight of solitude lift, replaced by the power of alliance and the promise of a fight worth winning. The days blurred together in a fierce rhythm. Elise and Shiv spent every hour watching, waiting, gathering what little intelligence they could from the hills and canyons around the poisoned land. The air grew warmer, spring pushing through the frost, but the danger never thawed. Maria Delgado's men grew more reckless, more brazen, trucks rumbling down dirt roads at midnight, strangers lurking at the edge of town. It became clear they needed help. 2 people, no matter how skilled, couldn't take on a cartel. And so the circle widened. The first new ally came out of necessity, not trust. Tessa Greyfeather, a tracker from the Flathead Reservation, showed up on the edge of the woods one afternoon, silent as a shadow. She watched Elise and Shiv for hours before making her presence known, moving so quietly that Shiv nearly put a bullet through a pine tree before she realized who she was aiming at. Tessa was tall, with a tumble of black hair and eyes that seemed to catch everything, missing nothing. She wore old jeans and battered hiking boots, a hunting knife on her hip, and a pair of binoculars strung around her neck. Elise recognized her from rodeos and local events. Tessa's tracking skills were legendary, but her family had been hit hard by the cartel's poison. Several horses dead. Her brother in the hospital. "You're not the only ones who lost something," Tessa said, crouching by the fire. "If you're going to fight Delgado, you need someone who knows this land better than she ever will." Elise nodded. "We need all the help we can get. But this isn't just a fight. It's a war." Tessa smiled grimly. "Then you'd better start acting like an army." The next arrival was less expected, but just as vital. Casey "Chip" Winters, a scrawny, quick-talking woman in her late 20s, famous around the county for hacking everything from casino slot machines to gas station cameras. Chip's dad had lost his job after refusing to look the other way when cartel money started flowing through the town's only bank. He'd been run out, his reputation ruined. Chip had a grudge and a laptop full of secrets. She showed up with a backpack, 2 burner phones, and an attitude that could cut steel. "Heard you're taking on Delgado. Figure you'll need someone to keep her blind and broke." Shiv eyed her with suspicion. "You got skills, or just talk?" Chip grinned, flipping her laptop open. "Watch and learn." Within minutes, she had tapped into a cartel comm channel, the air filling with scratchy Spanish and bursts of static. "They're using old radio frequencies, easy to eavesdrop if you know the codes. And I know the codes." Tessa and Chip had little in common, but their purpose was the same. Each had been hurt. Each wanted justice. Together, the 4 women became something new. A sisterhood forged by hardship and fury, determined to hit back where it hurt. The Mustang, always present, always watchful, became their totem, a symbol of hope that was spreading through the valley. Ranchers whispered about the wild black horse seen running with Elise's group. Kids drew pictures of it on fences and barns. Some even left apples and bits of sugar at the edge of the woods, hoping for a glimpse. Elise began to see it too, not just as an animal, but as a sign the land hadn't given up on them. "We move when the Mustang moves," she joked one evening, watching it graze nearby. "Seems to know trouble before we do." Tessa nodded. "My grandmother would have called that a spirit guide. Maybe it's here for you. Maybe it's here for all of us." With Chip's help, they mapped out Delgado's operations. Satellite images, intercepted texts, even drones borrowed from a nearby ranch. They tracked supply trucks, marked safe houses, and built a chart of every loyalist and weak link in town. Resistance started small. Tessa led a campaign of sabotage, slashing cartel tires, freeing stolen horses, sending warning shots in the dead of night. Chip hijacked security cameras, creating blind spots that allowed the team to move unseen. Shiv, deadly with a rifle, left messages for the cartel, empty shells painted with Delgado's initials scattered at the edge of their camps. Elise coordinated it all, a quiet leader whose calm masked a growing storm. The Mustang appeared before every action, as if blessing their efforts or warning of danger. Word spread, first as rumors, then as stories. The legend of the Black Horse grew. The people of the valley, long afraid to speak, began to resist in small ways. Anonymous tips, sabotage deliveries, secret meetings behind shuttered windows. But with every act of rebellion, the threat grew. Delgado's men grew harsher, patrolling roads with machine guns, shaking down anyone suspected of helping the women. The sheriff, Cole, grew more conflicted, torn between his duty and the fear in his gut. Still, the sisterhood pressed on. Around the fire, they planned their biggest move yet, gathering enough evidence to expose Delgado's grip on the region and rally the town against her. It would mean risk. It would mean sacrifice. But it was the only way. "We're not just fighting for ourselves," Elise told them one night, voice steady. "We're fighting for everyone who lost something to fear. And we're not backing down." The Mustang whinnied from the ridge, black coat shining under the moon. Tessa grinned. "That's a good omen." Chip smirked. "Or maybe just hungry." Shiv threw another log on the fire. "Either way, let's make them remember the night we started taking back our home." As dawn broke, the sisterhood stood together, stronger for their scars, ready to turn the legend of the Mustang into a revolution. Montana nights were black and bottomless, the stars sharp and cold above the valley. Elise Walker crouched with her team behind a stand of cottonwoods, hearts pounding as they watched the Cartel warehouse on the edge of town. The place used to be an old grain depot. Now it was fortified with barbed wire, floodlights, and men with automatic rifles. Trucks came and went, sometimes loaded with chemicals, sometimes with faces Elise recognized. Neighbors, local ranchers, all under Maria Delgado's thumb. Tonight was different. Tonight, they were done watching. Elise scanned the perimeter through binoculars, the Mustang's legend humming in the back of her mind. The wild horse had appeared twice that afternoon, circling the warehouse from afar, never coming closer, but never leaving. To the four women, it was a sign. If there was ever a time to act, it was now. "Window on the south side is cracked," Chip whispered, eyes glued to the screen of her hacked tablet. "I've looped the camera feeds for 7 minutes. That's our window." Shiv loaded a magazine, checked the safety, nodded. "Tessa, you lead. I'll cover." Tessa Greyfeather moved like a ghost through the grass, melting into shadow. Elise followed, knife strapped to her thigh, heart steady but fierce. Behind them, Chip kept her headset on, relaying every movement of the guards as she monitored Cartel chatter. The world shrank to silence and adrenaline. The women reached the wall, pressed close. Tessa signaled, a quick, sharp flick of her fingers, and boosted Chip through the window first. Elise squeezed in behind, boots barely touching the creaking floorboards. Inside, the warehouse smelled of old hay, gasoline, and fear. Cages lined the far wall. Dozens of workers, most of them migrants, their faces drawn and haunted. Elise felt rage tighten in her chest. These weren't just prisoners. They were leverage, insurance against the community ever fighting back. "We free them first," Elise mouthed. Tessa nodded, working at the locks with practiced hands. Chip moved to a battered desk and started copying files from an old desktop tower. The screen flashed with Cartel transactions, shipments, ledgers, evidence enough to put Maria Delgado behind bars forever. Outside, Shiv's voice crackled over the radio. "2 guards heading your way. Make it fast." Tessa opened the last cage. The workers filed out, some stumbling, all terrified. Elise whispered, "North fence, move fast and quiet. Shiv will cover you." She locked eyes with an old man at the front of the group. "Can you lead them out?" He nodded, gratitude flickering in his eyes. Chip's laptop beeped. "Got it. Let's go." As the group hustled toward the exit, a guard rounded the corner, saw the jailbreak, shouted for backup. Shiv's rifle cracked, dropping the man before he could raise the alarm, but chaos erupted. Alarms screamed, red lights flashing. More guards burst through the doors. Tessa grabbed a length of pipe, swung with deadly precision. Elise tackled another guard, fighting with the brutal, desperate energy she hadn't used since the war. Chip pulled a taser from her backpack, zapping a third attacker as Shiv's cover fire rang out, sharp and unerring. In the chaos, the Mustang appeared, racing through the field outside the fence, mane flying. One of the workers saw it and shouted in Spanish, "El Caballo Negro! It's the wild one! Run!" Word spread like wildfire. The workers surged, finding the courage to fight back, overwhelming two guards at the gate. Elise's group burst outside just as headlights approached. Another cartel truck, engine roaring. But the Mustang charged the vehicle, rearing up so fiercely that the men inside slammed on the brakes, terrified. The truck veered into a ditch, useless. The townsfolk, drawn by the alarms and rumors, started to gather at a distance, flashlights bobbing. They saw the women leading a chain of rescued captives, saw the black horse standing guard. Cameras came out, phones capturing every second as the legend came to life. "Get it on video!" Chip yelled, even as she hauled the last man over the fence. "Let the world see what Delgado's done here." Shiv fired one last warning shot into the air. "We're clear. Let's move." They vanished into the night, hearts pounding, carrying wounded and evidence both. The warehouse burned behind them, a signal fire that split the dark. Within hours, footage of the black Mustang, rearing defiantly as workers escaped, was everywhere. By morning, the story had gone viral. The Walker Ranch rebels, the wild horse, the fall of Delgado's first stronghold. Across Montana, people watched and wondered. Had the tide finally turned? Maria Delgado saw the news before dawn, the footage lighting up her phone. Her eyes narrowed, lips twisting with rage. She slapped a fresh bounty on the women, wanted posters, cash rewards, orders to bring them in dead or alive. Her empire, built on fear, was under threat, and she swore vengeance. Yet for Elise, it was a victory, not just for herself, but for everyone who'd suffered. As the sun rose, townsfolk began to question the cartel's narrative, whispering about the courage of the women, the mythic Mustang, the proof of evil now laid bare. Elise's name, once mud, was starting to clear. The war was far from over. The bounty on their heads made every road dangerous. But for the first time, the people weren't just afraid, they had hope. And as the Mustang galloped free across the ridge, its silhouette bold in the new day, Elise knew they were ready to fight for more than just survival. They were fighting to reclaim their lives, their land, and the spirit of the West itself. Montana's golden sunrise felt different that morning. For a moment, the air was filled with hope, a rare feeling Elise Walker hadn't tasted in years. News of the warehouse raid had spread fast, and the people who once whispered behind her back now looked up as she passed, eyes shining with cautious respect. The wild Mustang, once a myth, had become a symbol, its image painted on fences and scrawled in children's chalk on the cracked sidewalks of Main Street. For the first time since her return, Elise allowed herself a glimmer of belief that things might turn around. But hope is a fragile thing in a place ruled by fear and secrets. That afternoon, Elise, Shiv, Tessa, and Chip huddled in an abandoned cattle barn 2 miles out of town, poring over the evidence they'd snatched from the cartel's computers. Chip's laptop was a mess of open files, money laundering spreadsheets, lists of bribes, coded messages, and, most damning, a list of local officials on Delgado's payroll. "We have enough here to blow this whole thing wide open," Chip said, her voice barely above a whisper, eyes shining with excitement. "If we get this to the right people, press, feds, even the governor, it'll force their hand. Delgado can't buy everyone." Shiv nodded, but her face was grim. "If we move too fast, she'll lash out. We need more, a clean public win. The community has to see her bleed." Tessa, silent until now, glanced out a crack in the barn wall. "People are scared, but they're waking up. We can't let them down now." Elise felt pride, a sense of unity she hadn't experienced since the military. For a brief, perfect moment, it felt like family. But every triumph has its shadows. They didn't know it yet, but as they plotted their next move, a pair of eyes watched from a truck parked at the edge of the pasture. A man in a faded baseball cap, hands trembling as he texted a number saved in his phone as MD. The price on Elise's head was more money than he'd see in 10 lifetimes. That evening, while the group reviewed escape routes and planned the next strike, Tessa's phone buzzed, a single message from her cousin. "Don't go home. Someone's looking for you." A cold knot tightened in Elise's stomach. Chip shut her laptop. "We should move. Now." But as they packed up, the Mustang in the pasture grew restless, ears pricked, snorting, circling as if sensing something was off. Elise's nerves hummed. The animal's unease had saved her before. "Shiv, check the perimeter," Elise said. Shiv melted into the shadows with her rifle, eyes sharp. The warning came too late. Tires screeched at the barn's entrance. 3 black SUVs roared up, cartel men piling out, guns drawn, faces hard and hungry for the bounty. "Get down!" Elise shouted. Bullets tore through the barn wall, splinters flying. Tessa dove for cover behind a trough. Chip slid under a pile of hay, and Elise grabbed her pistol, firing back with the ruthless focus she'd learned in combat. Shiv returned fire from the barn's far side, picking off 2 men before ducking back as bullets cracked past her ear. But the cartel had numbers, and inside help. The man in the baseball cap appeared in the chaos, his eyes meeting Elise's for a split second before he vanished into the smoke. Elise's heart plummeted. Someone local, someone they trusted, had sold them out. The attackers swept in, shoving Tessa to the ground and wrenching her arms behind her back. "You come with us?" the leader snarled, dragging her toward an SUV. Elise surged forward, but 2 guns pinned her down. "Elise, don't!" Tessa shouted, struggling as the men threw her into the vehicle. Shiv's voice cracked over the radio, desperate. "I can't get a shot. They've got her." Chip crawled from the hay, clutching the hard drive. "We can't let them get this. Elise, what do we do?" The Mustang crashed through the open side of the barn, eyes wild, hooves flashing. For an instant, the cartel men faltered, spooked by the legend-made flesh. Elise used the chaos, diving forward, grabbing Chip, and rolling them both behind the old tractor as bullets smashed into metal. "Run!" Elise yelled. Shiv covered their escape, but the numbers were overwhelming. Tessa was gone. Vanished in the blur of black SUVs kicking up dust, the sound of her shouting lost in the roar. Elise's group stumbled through the back fields, hearts pounding, adrenaline burning through fear and heartbreak. They didn't stop until they reached a ravine, panting and bloodied. The Mustang followed, limping but unbroken, nuzzling Elise's shoulder as if to say, "Don't give up." Shiv slammed her fist into the dirt. "We lost her. We lost Tessa." Elise squeezed her shoulder, voice shaking but hard. We're not done. We get her back, no matter what. Chip stared at the hard drive, eyes wet. They'll torture her, try to break her. We can't let that happen. Elise looked out across the fields, the barn now just a smoking ruin behind them. Betrayal burned in her chest. The sheriff's silence, his failure to act, echoed like another bullet. They were hunted, wounded, divided, but not beaten. That night, as they hid in a cave with only the Mustang for company, Elise promised herself that she would not let the darkness win. Tessa had risked everything. Now it was their turn. We bring her home, Elise whispered to the Mustang, to Shiv, to Chip, and to the wind. We bring them all home, or we die trying. And in the flicker of firelight, hope struggled to survive, wounded but alive. Night pressed in around the ravine where Elise, Shiv, and Chip huddled with the Mustang, exhaustion written in every line of their bodies. The memory of Tessa's capture lingered in the air, a raw ache that gnawed at each of them in silence. Elise sat staring into the glow of their tiny campfire, mind racing, haunted by the look in Tessa's eyes as she was dragged away. The group had survived betrayal and ambush, but survival meant nothing if they left Tessa behind. Elise gripped her pistol, every muscle in her body straining for action. Shiv paced nearby, her anger barely contained, while Chip clutched her laptop, face pale in the firelight. We can't just wait here, Shiv snapped, breaking the silence. They'll torture her, Elise. Delgado's people don't play games. I know, Elise said, her voice raw. We're not waiting. We're planning. Chip glanced up, resolve flickering through her fear. We have one shot at this. I've been scanning their radio chatter. They're moving Tessa tonight, to Delgado's compound at the old quarry. Security's tight. Cameras, guards, dogs, and Delgado's bringing in more men. Shiv's jaw clenched. So we go in loud and hard. No, Elise said, shaking her head. They'll expect that. We need a distraction big enough to draw every guard away from the holding cells. Chip, can you hack their power grid? Chip hesitated, then nodded. If I can get close enough to their control box, yes, but that gets us 5 minutes at most. 5 minutes is enough, Elise said. We go in, grab Tessa, and get out before the dust settles. The Mustang snorted softly, ears twitching toward the west, the direction of the quarry. Elise met its eyes. You're with us, aren't you? She whispered, feeling the wild energy of the animal thrumming in her veins. They moved quickly, keeping to the trees and deep shadows. Shiv scouting ahead with her sniper rifle, Chip lagging behind with a tangle of wires and tools, and Elise steady in the center. The night air was sharp, thick with tension and the smell of pine. Every sound was magnified, every shadow a threat. As they reached the outer fence of the quarry, Chip crawled to the control box, a squat metal structure humming with power. She worked in near darkness, fingers flying, sweat beading on her brow. Shiv set up on a rise overlooking the guardhouse, sighting in on the lone sentry by the back gate. Elise checked her gear, rehearsing the plan in her mind. Suddenly, from the dark beyond the fence, a guard's voice called out, "Hey, who's out there?" The Mustang burst from the trees with a shrill whinny, charging straight at the guard. The man froze, eyes wide, as the horse barreled past him, scattering 3 more men who'd run to help. Panic erupted in the compound, guards shouting, radios crackling, dogs barking wildly at the shadowy blur. The Mustang doubled back, darting between vehicles, creating chaos so total that even the security cameras turned away from the gates. Now! Elise hissed, signaling Chip. Chip slammed a final command into the control box. The lights inside the quarry flickered and died, plunging the compound into darkness. Alarms wailed. Floodlights struggled to reboot. Shiv picked off the distracted sentry with a single shot. Non-lethal, but enough to knock him cold. Elise scaled the fence and ran low, hugging the wall of the main building. Inside, she heard voices, angry, frantic. She slipped down a side hallway, finding the holding cells by memory and instinct. Tessa was there, wrists bound, face bruised but defiant. Two guards stood over her, arguing in Spanish about whether to move her or wait for Delgado. Elise crept closer, pressing herself against the wall, counting heartbeats. Then, as one guard stepped outside to check the blackout, Elise moved. She slammed the second guard's head against the bars, dropping him with practiced efficiency. Tessa looked up, relief and anger flooding her eyes. "Took you long enough," she managed, voice hoarse. Elise grinned, breathless. "We're not leaving anyone behind." She cut the ropes binding Tessa's wrists and helped her to her feet. "Can you walk?" "I'll run if I have to," Tessa said, trying to smile. They slipped out just as Chip's voice crackled in their earpiece. "You've got 2 minutes before backup arrives. Out. Now." Outside, chaos reigned. The Mustang reappeared, charging through a line of guards, scattering them like bowling pins. Shiv's rifle barked from the shadows, keeping the escape route clear. Elise and Tessa sprinted across the yard, bullets whining past them, but luck, or fate, was on their side. As they reached the tree line, Chip met them, out of breath but grinning. "I've got something," she panted, waving a USB drive. "I found Delgado's secret files. She's planning to poison the water supply for the whole valley. She's moving fast because she knows the community is turning." Elise's blood ran cold. That's not just cartel business. That's mass murder. "We have to warn the town," Shiv said, "and bring this evidence to Cole and the townsfolk. We'll make them listen this time." Together, battered but unbroken, the 4 women and the Mustang fled into the night. The adrenaline faded only as dawn bled into the sky and the first lights of town flickered to life. They made their way to a trusted rancher's house, where they shared the evidence, documents, photographs, voice recordings, and the truth about Delgado's plan. This time, the townsfolk listened. This time, they believed. As the sun rose over Montana, the rebels gathered, old ranchers, young families, and war veterans alike. Elise looked around at her battered, brilliant allies and the wild Mustang grazing quietly nearby. She knew the fight was far from over, but the tide had turned. For the first time, hope felt stronger than fear. Morning came with a hard, cold clarity. The light over Montana's valley was brighter than it had been in weeks. Word of Maria Delgado's crimes, and her plot to poison the local water, spread through the town like wildfire. There was no going back. The fear that once kept everyone silent had burned away, replaced by a simmering anger. Elise Walker stood in front of the old community hall, the wild Mustang grazing on the edge of the crowd. Dozens of townsfolk gathered, faces she remembered from childhood, faces she'd only seen as shadows behind curtains, and faces marked by loss. Veterans in faded army jackets, young mothers clutching babies, old cowboys leaning on canes. Even Sheriff Cole stood in the back, hat in his hands, guilt written deep in his eyes. Elise stepped onto the makeshift stage, her voice ringing clear. "You know who I am. You know what I've lost. And you know what Maria Delgado's done to all of us. Last night, we found proof, real proof. She's planning to poison our water, take what's left of our land, and leave us with nothing. She held up the files Chip had hacked, the recordings, the photos of caged workers and barrels marked with poison. This is our home. This is our fight. Delgado thinks she can buy or break every one of us. But I say, no more. Murmurs turned to shouts of agreement. People pressed forward, hungry for leadership, hungry for justice. Sheriff Cole stepped forward, voice trembling. I was wrong. I should have protected you, Elise. I should have believed you. But I'm with you now. All the way. Elise nodded, eyes shining with a complicated gratitude. We need everyone. Veterans, ranchers, anyone willing to stand up. We take the fight to Delgado, today. We take back what's ours. The crowd exploded with purpose. Tools became weapons. Pickup trucks became armored transports. Shiv and Tessa organized the veterans. Chip coordinated the townsfolk with walkie-talkies and burner phones. And Elise scouted the land, with the Mustang running ahead, marking the safest routes to the ranch Delgado had made her base. Maria Delgado watched the growing resistance from her window, rage boiling in her chest. She barked orders at her men, stacking more guns and bodies around her compound. No one gets in. I want Walker and her friends dead. Do you hear me? The final stand began at sunset. Elise led the charge, Mustang at her side, as the townsfolk stormed the ranch gates. Spotlights flashed, guns blazed, but the defenders were outnumbered and outmatched. Old grievances turned into courage. The Mustang darted through chaos, spooking cartel horses, scattering Delgado's guards. Shiv's sniper shots cracked through the night, taking out the tires of cartel vehicles and forcing panicked men to flee on foot. Tessa led a team of trackers around the back, freeing more workers and leading them to safety. Chip hacked the security system, throwing the compound into confusion. Lights flickering, gates slamming open, alarms wailing uselessly. In the heart of the fighting, Elise ducked behind a stone wall, breath coming in short, sharp bursts. She could see Delgado on the balcony, screaming at her men, firing her pistol blindly into the crowd. Elise's anger burned hot. This wasn't just vengeance anymore. It was justice for everyone Delgado had hurt. A sudden explosion rocked the compound. Someone had blown the main gate, letting in a flood of townsfolk. The Mustang reared up, hooves flashing, and charged straight into a group of armed men, scattering them with the fury of legend. Elise sprinted up the side steps, dodging bullets. She burst through the door and found Delgado barricaded behind a desk, surrounded by loot and ledgers. The cartel boss's eyes widened in panic. "It's over, Maria! There's nowhere left to run!" Elise shouted. Delgado snarled, grabbing a shotgun. "You'll never take this from me. Never! I built this empire!" She fired. The blast splintered wood inches from Elise's head. Elise dove, tackled Delgado, the two women crashing to the floor in a whirl of fists and rage. Delgado fought dirty, clawing and kicking, but Elise was fueled by pain and purpose. The Mustang, as if summoned by Elise's will, crashed through the shattered door, eyes wild, nostrils flaring. Delgado froze, terror lighting her face. Elise seized the moment, snatched the gun away, pinned Delgado to the floor. Outside, the sheriff's deputies, finally free from fear, stormed the room. "Maria Delgado, you're under arrest!" Cole's voice rang out, strong and sure at last. The fight was over. Delgado's men dropped their weapons, hands up, beaten not just by force, but by the people they'd tried to silence. Elise staggered outside, bloodied but standing tall, The townsfolk erupted in cheers, lifting her onto their shoulders, chanting her name. She looked out over the land, the fires dying down, the Mustang circling free and proud, and the valley safe once more. Shiv, Tessa, and Chip found her in the crowd, battered and grinning, all of them hugging fiercely. "You did it, Walker," Shiv said, voice hoarse. "No," Elise replied. "We did it, all of us." The Mustang reared on the ridge, silhouetted against the purple sky, a living legend whose spirit had helped save them all. The town was theirs again. The land was free. And the story of Elise Walker and the wild black Mustang would be told for generations. The battle was over, but victory didn't feel like the end. For days after Delgado's arrest, a hush settled over the valley. A stunned, grateful silence, broken only by the sound of distant hammering, repairs underway, and the calls of birds returning to land that no longer stank of fear. Authorities descended on the ranch. FBI agents, state troopers, and a swarm of reporters swept through town, snapping photos of battered barns, seized contraband, and a lineup of handcuffed cartel enforcers. Elise Walker watched from the porch of her half-rebuilt home, exhaustion tugging at her bones, but her eyes still sharp, her posture still straight. She hadn't slept more than a few hours since the night of the final stand, haunted by the faces of the people she'd fought for, and the memories of those they'd lost. The law moved quickly. Maria Delgado and her lieutenants were flown out under heavy guard, their faces stony with defeat. The sheriff, Cole, stood beside Elise as the last of the prisoners were loaded onto buses. "You did what I couldn't," Cole said quietly, hat twisting in his hands. "You brought this place back from the brink." Elise shook her head. "You did your part, Cole. We all did." But Cole's eyes flickered with old pain. "I should have believed you sooner. Should have listened when your father tried to warn me." Elise squeezed his arm. "Guilt's easy. Forgiveness is harder. You stood with us in the end. That's what matters now." The townsfolk set to work restoring what had been broken. Burned-out barns were raised again, fences mended. Poisoned wells flushed clean under the supervision of state inspectors. Survivors of Delgado's forced labor were given jobs, homes, and care from the community. Even the local bar reopened. No more cartel lookouts on the porch, just laughter and the clink of glasses. The wild black Mustang became a local legend, its story growing with every retelling. Some said it was a spirit, others a flesh-and-blood animal too smart to ever be caught. Kids painted its image on walls, and people who'd once only whispered in fear now wore silver horse pendants for luck. But for Elise and her friends, healing wasn't so easy. Tessa struggled with nightmares, flashes of her capture and the cold certainty that she might never see daylight again. Elise found her one morning in the barn, sitting with her back to a stall, staring into space. She knelt beside her, arms around her shoulders, holding her until the shaking stopped. "You're safe now," Elise whispered. Tessa let out a long breath. "Safe, yeah, but not the same." Elise understood. None of them would ever be the same. Shiv, too, bore scars, though she hid them behind sarcasm and sharp humor. She spent hours each day training the younger townsfolk in self-defense, drilling them in the same tactics she'd learned overseas. "You don't let your guard down just because the sun's out," she'd say, eyes fierce, voice even. "Freedom is work." Chip, for her part, became the town's unofficial tech chief. She used her skills to restore internet to outlying ranches, taught local kids about digital safety, and set up a secure network for sharing news and resources. When people praised her, she shrugged. Just doing what I wish someone had done for me and my dad. Amid all this, Elise felt the weight of leadership settle heavier than ever. She'd cleared her name, yes. The evidence was overwhelming, and no one questioned her innocence now. But being a hero didn't erase what she'd lost. Her father was gone. Her family's land was scarred, and the past could never be rebuilt the way it was. One evening, as the sun slid behind the mountains, Elise climbed to the highest point on her land. The Mustang appeared, as it often did, snorting softly, tail flicking at flies. For a long time they stood in silence, watching the world turn gold and violet. Elise spoke quietly, more to herself than to the animal. It's never really over, is it? There's always something else to fix, someone else to help. The Mustang dipped its head, as if understanding. The next morning, Elise gathered her friends, Tessa, Shiv, Chip, and the families they'd fought for. They held a gathering in the field behind the rebuilt barn. No speeches, just food, music, and the quiet relief of having survived. The community brought flowers, tokens of thanks, letters of gratitude. Survivors from the forced labor ring shared their stories, some in English, some in Spanish, all raw and brave. Later, Elise spoke with the children, letting them braid ribbons into the Mustang's mane. She laughed for the first time in what felt like years, the sound surprising even herself. After sunset, a hush fell over the crowd. Elise took the stage, searching for words. I can't tell you what comes next. We're all changed by what happened. We lost friends and neighbors. We fought, and we survived. But healing takes more than a victory. It takes time. It takes each other. She paused, scanning the faces before her, some new, some old, some marked by grief and hope. We learned the cost of justice. We learned that scars don't always fade, and that courage sometimes means standing alone. But most times, it means standing together. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. We're not just rebuilding land, Elise finished. We're rebuilding trust, rebuilding hope, and learning that every single one of us has a role to play. As the crowd dispersed, Elise felt lighter. Her burden finally shared among many. The Mustang stood on the edge of the field, watching, untamed and free, a living symbol of what the community could become. In that moment, Elise knew that healing wasn't a destination. It was a journey, walked together. Months passed, and Montana's valley greened with new life. Where ashes once marked tragedy, grass pushed up, tenacious, bold. The Walker Ranch, burned and battered, rose again with every sunrise. Timber beams, rough but sturdy, crisscrossed the frame of a new barn. Neighbors gathered for the raising, hammering side by side, laughter and easy conversation replacing the silence that once haunted these hills. But the truest change ran deeper than any fence or building. Elise Walker moved through the land with purpose, no longer a pariah, but a pillar. The scars she carried, inside and out, had not faded, but something brighter lived alongside them. The valley was healing, not just in structure, but in spirit. The ranch became more than a home. With Shiv, Tessa, and Chip, Elise turned it into a refuge for those left broken by violence and injustice. Survivors, women, veterans, lost kids, and families from every walk of life found shelter beneath its roof. They worked the fields, fixed fences, learned skills, and shared meals in the old kitchen Elise rebuilt by hand. There were tears some days, but there was laughter too, and music on Saturday nights, and hope. Elise spent quiet hours mentoring the young women who came through the door, teaching not just survival, but courage. "You're stronger than you think," she'd say, watching the way fear gave way to pride in their eyes. "Scars don't mean you're broken. They mean you survived." Shiv ran self-defense classes in the barn, her tough love hiding the fierce care beneath. "We don't cower anymore," she'd say, flipping an eager teenager into a hay bale, grinning as everyone burst out laughing. "You want to change the world? Start by standing your ground." Tessa became the heart of the fields, teaching tracking and land skills, blending tradition and modern knowledge. Kids from the town school visited, learning to listen to the wind, to read the earth, to respect every living thing that called this place home. Chip built the ranch's new digital hub, a sunlit room full of battered laptops and blinking routers, open to all. She taught veterans to code, set up virtual classrooms, and ran workshops on spotting online scams and protecting privacy. "No one's getting blindsided on my watch," she'd joke, but her pride was real. The wild Mustang was never tamed. No one even tried. Instead, the horse became legend. It roamed the ridges at dawn, sometimes alone, sometimes with a small band of other wild horses that returned to the land. Visitors left apples by the fence, hoping for a glimpse. Artists painted it on barns and silos. The Mustang became a symbol for something fierce, free and unbroken, a spirit you could only follow, never own. Every evening, as the sun slipped behind the distant peaks, Elise would climb to the hilltop, the Mustang often grazing in the shadow of a lonely pine. She'd stand, letting the wind tug at her hair, and think about everything that had changed. Sometimes the ache of loss threatened to pull her under. She'd remember her father's laugh, the hard lessons of war, the friends who didn't come home. But now, there was peace too, a sense that she was exactly where she needed to be. One night, as dusk painted the sky with gold and purple, the community gathered for a celebration. The ranch's new sign, Walker Sanctuary, was unveiled, greeted with cheers and tears. Townsfolk shared food and stories beneath strings of lanterns, fireflies spinning in the dark. A band played country songs, and kids danced barefoot in the grass. Elise took the stage at sunset, standing before faces she once thought she'd lost. She paused, searching for the right words. "We fought hard for this," she began, her voice steady. "We paid a price, every one of us. Some scars we wear on the outside, and some are buried deep, but we're here, together. That's our real legacy." She glanced at Shiv, Tessa, Chip, at the veterans who had joined them, the families they'd helped, the children whose laughter now rang across the fields. "This ranch is yours as much as it is mine. We rebuilt it as a place where no one has to be alone. Where justice is lived, not just talked about. Where courage means lifting each other up, not pushing anyone down." She let the silence linger, then continued. "Legacy isn't land or buildings or money. Legacy is what you inspire in others. It's hope. It's unity. It's having the courage to stand up even when you're afraid. It's refusing to let the world make you hard, even when it tries." The Mustang, as if sensing its moment, reared on the far hill, silhouetted against the blazing sky. Cheers erupted. Someone strummed a chord, and the crowd broke into song. Later that night, as lanterns glowed and the moon rose, Elise stood with her friends on the porch. Shiv's laughter echoed. Chip argued playfully with a little girl about computer games. Tessa quietly braided a wildflower into her hair. Elise breathed in the cool, sweet air. She knew the valley's story would travel far, a story of loss and triumph, of sacrifice and redemption, of community refusing to break. She whispered to the Mustang in the distance, "Thank you for showing us how to be wild and brave." The horse lifted its head as if to answer, and then disappeared into the shadow of the trees. Free, eternal. The world would change, troubles would come again, but something had shifted in Montana. The Walker Sanctuary stood as a beacon, a promise that broken things could be mended, that hope could grow from ashes, and that the wild spirit, like that of the Mustang, could guide even the lost back to themselves. Elise watched the sunrise the next morning, surrounded by friends, her story and the Mustang's legend living on in every heart. And so, the legacy endured. Courage, hope, unity, passed from hand to hand, story to story, forever untamed.